Bible classes in public high schools also imply that there is some shortage of Christian churches in America for high school students to go and visit and learn about the Bible. You know what's wrong with that, of course? Everything. There is entirely too many Christian churches in America. That's a fact. The major religions of the world are loaded with money and could solve the big problems of society today if they wanted to. The Vatican, Church of Latter-day Saints, Southern Baptist Convention. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporations that are actually for profit. Now, I would like to go ahead and issue a challenge to all atheists and other non-Christians in general. You know, anybody who's in favor of state-church separation. I have a challenge for you. If you're a public high school student in Texas, especially, sign up for one of those Bible classes. That's right. Become a student. Get in that class and raise some questions. See how long you last in that class as a valued member of that class. Because when we ask the tough questions that derive from simple logic and reasoning once we hear the claims in the first place, a lot of times Christian educators want to shut us out. And that's not free speech at all. I challenge any public high school student in Texas to sign up for one of those Bible classes. Get in that class. Become a student. Make yourself known. And ask questions. Ask the hard questions. So we activists ask. Your teacher in that class should be able to come up with some kind of answer. If your teacher in that class cannot answer you satisfactorily, and of course they won't be able to, not with these questions, then you need to say so. The second part of this Bible class challenge is, once you ask the questions, the really hard questions they can't answer with logical reason, tell them that. Let them know. Again, with respect, be a respectful student, be a good academic student about it. There's no need to be a vandal or malcontent. It's important to be respectful with this. Be a good student about it. I think a good student asks about the subject matter at hand, try to understand it. And so what they're doing by this is a big mistake, setting themselves up to have to answer questions about an illogical claim.
And welcome back.
Hey, that was fun. Now that we've primed your interest a little bit in the Texas Bible, huge mistake from the Christian right, we're going to give you a little bit of arming now, a little bit of information on how to arm yourself against the Bible as literature.
In other words, what happens if we really take them at their word?
Right. Let's look at the Bible as literature. There are some things that we really can pick apart. My personal favorite is that God is a bad guy in the Bible. He's not a good guy, okay? In the Bible, God, the character, knows the future. So Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and we had Pastor Bill Devlin on last week and the week before talking about this, and he couldn't go against this. He couldn't dispute this. God is in the Garden of Eden. He knows the future with 100% certainty. He puts the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, not to test. There's no free will involved because he already knows that Eve is going to eat the apple. He already knows that it's going to cause sin. He fakes his anger because he already knew it.
Well, maybe he was. Maybe according to the scripture, he wasn't faking.
Well, yeah, he had to have been faking.
He's shocked.
It's impossible to shock a God who knows the future.
Right.
Okay, so there is no. So what that was, what the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a setup. It had to be a setup. It was a trap by which God made Adam and Eve eat it because he knew just by me, if I take this pen and I drop it, I am making the pen fall. Okay, I am making the pen fall by dropping it. God knew by putting that tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, he made Adam and Eve eat of it because he knew for a fact that they would. And he punished billions of souls and sent them to hell because of that. He did it all with 100% foreknowledge. That makes God a bad guy.
Right, because if he didn't want them to have that kind of knowledge, why put the tree there in the first place?
Exactly. Well, and if he was going to punish people, I mean, there was no force. There was no choice here. He knew 100% certain. According to the Bible, God knew 6,000 years ago that you and I were going to have this conversation. Okay? He knew every soul that was going to hell. He knew every soul that was going to heaven, all three of them. And he knew everything was going to be triggered off him putting that tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. And he knew it with 100% certainty. That makes him a bad guy. He set a trap which he knew we would fall into. And,
right. Even with the flood, the story of the flood, he made human beings to be human, and when they turn out to act like human beings, he becomes enraged.
Yes.
And he causes a flood and breaks his toys.
Breaks all of his toys and murders the entire planet except for one family that, and one set of animals. Now, we're treating the Bible as literature, so we're not going to go into the feasibility of putting 1.5 billion creatures onto a boat. By the way, just in case you were going to do any math here, if you lined up the 1.5 billion creatures 2 by 2 and had them take 2 seconds to get on the boat, it would take 2 years. This is the rule of 2. 2 by 2, 2 seconds to board, 2 years to board the ark. Just to let you know
and that's
what
being
kind of
very generous
and
with time.
That's getting everybody, and that's day and night.
Well, here's something literary. In fact, in the book of Genesis, there's one section that has 2 pairs, and then there's another section that has 7 pairs.
Yeah. So it talks over itself.
So, that there's literally there are actually 4 different not segments, but there are 4 major influences in the Bible. And what happened was that they didn't want to edit out any, so they kind of mushed them all together. Mm-hmm. That's basically what happened.
And you've got 2 accounts of creation in the Bible, in Genesis. Okay,
right.
So it self-contradicts itself right in the middle, right in the beginning. And so from a literary standpoint, you've got a bad guy, God, and you also have an unsung hero in Judas. Judas is a good guy. Apparently, in my personal opinion, Judas is a good guy in the Bible, because if he didn't betray Jesus, Jesus wouldn't have been crucified, and people wouldn't have had their souls saved.
And the claim is that Jesus was supposed to be the fulfillment of the redemption.
Yeah.
And in order for that redemption to occur, a sacrifice had to be made, and Judas facilitated that according to the story.
And if he hadn't done that, we would not, according to the Bible, have had the opportunity to have our sins wiped out from the original sin, the Adam and Eve tree of knowledge of good and evil trap that God set 4,000 years prior to that. So Judas is a good guy. God is a bad guy. Judas actually saves people from God when it comes right down to it. God set the trap, and Judas is the one who actually saves people. And if Judas didn't do what he did,
well,
we would still be paying the price of God's trap against Adam and Eve.
If you don't do any thinking, it's kind of very lyrical and fantastic, and human beings love that magic stuff anyway. So,
oh, sure.
So I suppose if it makes sense that God would impregnate a virgin in order to give birth to himself, in order to be sacrificed to himself, in order to sit beside himself, in order to save the world from himself.
Say that again.
No, I'm not saying
no, but that's wonderful.
If you're going to accept that, then the idea that, well, I guess, because look, the Roman gods were drama queens, and they made grandiose displays. So I guess in that fine tradition that you would have this angry patriarchal God who knew in advance that people were going to screw up, and then basically allowed his own. I'm getting myself.
He made it happen. He made it happen by just like I dropped the pen, I made the pen drop. God made sin. God made sin, and He made people sin.
Yeah, see, that's the trouble when you have an absolute. Absolutely no excuses.
Absolutely no excuses.
You know.
And what we're talking about here, again, Bible as literature. Let's rip it apart.